I was born in Ukraine. We left Ukraine because we had to leave Ukraine. 1944, when we were again liberated by the Russians. First, we were liberated in 1939 by the Russians from the Poles. And then we were liberated by the Germans from the Russians in 1941. And then 1944, the Russians came back and liberated us again from the Germans. My father was a marked man. He had fought both the Russians and the Nazis. And the word came down to him with the Russians coming back, we had to leave. That was 1944. It was March. I was very little. I don't remember that, but I have my mother's memoirs. And somehow we got a ride from our village in Terebolia, Western Ukraine, maybe about 75 kilometers, slightly southeast of Lviv. I think everybody's familiar with that city now. And then we were on our own. And I truly believe that, for what my mother told me, when she was born in 1939, my father then was fighting the Russians. 1941, 42, when I was born, well, now my father was fighting the Nazis, okay? So, but he was told to leave because we would have either been all killed, shot, or sent to Siberia. Slow death, right? So, packed us up. They said goodbye to their family. They said goodbye to everything they had ever had. Family was there for millennium, for years and years. And he had to save his children. So they had their sights set on going west to freedom. There are certain things that I recall. I remember bombs falling. I remember hearing that noise. In Slovakia, I remember because I got some food that has stuck with me. We were at a farm, apparently, and my mother asked if we could rest there, and the kind lady said, well, you can rest in the barn. And my mother said, we haven't had any food. And the lady said, well, all I have in the garden right now is the ends of this green onion. She says, and I have a little bit of homemade cream that I made. So this is what we had, green onion and homemade sour cream. And it was, to this day, when I make this, I make it at home because it reminds me of my mother. And because it tasted so good that I remember it to this day. So that's where we spent a night, maybe 2 nights. And then we had to move on because they were catching up to us. And again, Slovaks people, they didn't seem to understand about the Russians, because the other thing that my mother told me in her memoirs that she wrote down, she said, they said to us, well, why are you leaving Ukraine? You've been liberated by the Russians. There was no explaining to them. But my mother said to them, someday you will know why. And sure enough, that day came. I'm telling you this story because when I see these people lined up at the border of Ukraine, it reminds me of our trip. But, we had no car to leave. We had no plane. We didn't know what awaited us. There was nobody there on the western part of the world that we knew would help us. There was nobody, but we knew that we had to leave Ukraine in order to save our lives. So when we got to Hungary, we went on, we crossed over those Carpathian mountains, got to Slovakia, then on to Hungary. And there, the war was still going on. We were caught by the Nazis there. And again, this comes to my mind. We were put into some kind of a makeshift concentration camp. What I remember is that it was cold and wet, and I see barbed wires around, and just loads and loads of people crowded in, just shoved in there. And I'm sitting on the ground with my sister, who's 3 years older than I am, and somebody gave her a tin cup. And it had some kind of cabbage in it. So, of course, we were hungry, so she is taking this cabbage out and giving a little bit to me, and she's eating a little bit. And then I noticed she's taking something else out and throwing it out. She took this out, and it was so warm. I mean, there was live worms, but even though she was maybe about 5 years old, she knew the difference, of course. You don't eat live worms. I do remember this because this stuck in my mind, sitting on the ground with my sister, with these people just crowded around us. There was just a lot of confusion. There was chaos because, the war was ending. The Germans knew this, but still they had these people. And I remember then a time came, we weren't there very long, maybe a couple weeks, but then all of a sudden it's like, okay, we're leaving the camp. They're herding people just out, just pushing them out of the camp. This camp, because I've gone back, Sátoraljaújhely is the name of this town in Hungary. I've been there. It was right next to a railroad track, and there were cars there, and they're moving these people out onto the trains. I think my mother somehow has street smarts. She recognized what was going on. And apparently my father was further back with my sister because people just, crowding everywhere. And she said, oh, I got to go back, get my husband, he's over there. And she shoved him back, and they just kept, while this mass of people are going towards the gate, she's going backwards against this wave, grabbed my father, and they hid behind this farthest building in this camp. And apparently there were a couple other families there. And the Germans were in such a hurry, nobody came back to check anything because they had to get all these people out of here, right? Where they went, God only knows. I hope they didn't. I don't know. We were saved.
So what's happening in Ukraine right now? We see the news, but what is your report from your family in Ukraine?
Well, they alleged in 1932 and 33 that there was no famine, as we call Holodomor, where 10 million Ukrainians were starved to death by Stalin. Yeah. So now everything is alleged, but that is happening. This almost reflects what is happening today. In fact, not almost, because it does. We are finding similar pictures of people dying on the streets, say Kharkiv, which has been in the news today, the Russians trying to overtake Kharkiv on the eastern front of Ukraine. And then what is going on today and what happened then. And we're seeing the same slaughter. We're seeing mass graves. All these people that are leaving Ukraine. As we know, I have to just say something about their president, Volodymyr Zelensky. He's a Jewish man who was a comic, had a TV show, right? And when I see him, how he has transformed. And then I see him mature. He's been to America several times. He's met with the diaspora. And then when the war came, and the man is transformed again. And I truly feel that God has something to do with it, because he has spoken. He speaks to the Ukrainians. He said, these are my people. When Biden offered him a ride out, he said, I don't need a ride, I need ammunition. That is so true. He wasn't going anywhere. He loves Ukraine. He has a family. They're there with him. We don't see them, but they're there. They're not going anywhere. And he has, I think, given Ukraine hope that Ukraine can win this war. This is David and Goliath's story. But I think I know in my heart that Ukraine will win this war. He speaks to them every day, and he invokes God. He prays. He prays, and he said to the Russians, you can murder us, you can burn down our buildings, you can bomb us, but you cannot take our faith away from us, our faith in God. And he repeated this again at St. Sophia's Cathedral. In fact, he invoked a prayer. He said, Almighty Eternal God, and he said, save Ukraine and save its people. Then his little longer prayer to God. And he ended it with, Christos voskres, voistinu voskres. We mean, Christ has risen, indeed he has risen. Those were his ending words. This is coming from Volodymyr Zelensky. And I think because of him and the hope he's given to Ukrainians, that they will continue to fight and Ukraine will be free again. This is deep in my heart.
How can Americans help? How would you call us to help you, to help Ukraine?
Pray. There's a Ukrainian prayer, Boże Veliki Yedini, great God, Almighty God. And for the last month, I have heard this prayer, which is sung, which we sing every Sunday in church at the end of the liturgy. I have now heard choirs from practically all over the world singing this hymn in Ukrainian. And it's a prayer to God. It's a prayer to God. And it asks God to save Ukraine, preserve Ukraine, save its people. And it can apply to any country when they're asking for God to be part of their country. It's just keep it strong and keep its people faithful. I just got a newsletter from Ukraine. They're in the bomb shelter. There's a priest there. And what are the people doing? They're praying. You know, we prayed through the war, World War II. I said to my mother, well, what, you know, she said, you know, there's a diminutive word for God, and it's Bożu. Bog is God. Bożu is something a child will say, Bożu. And she said, I taught you that word. She said, every time we were just going along, she said, you were just saying, Bożu, Bożu, Bożu. That was my prayer as a 2-year-old. I think prayer, yes, prayer will overcome this.